My name is Steve Hill. I know quite a lot of you here, but not everyone. Um, I'm a graduate of Cape Elizabeth High School in 1968 and have kind of kept my finger in the sports scene off and on for a lot of years. Just quickly, what brings us here? How did this all happen? Because this is a little unorthodox program as Historical Society programs go. Several months ago, a friend at church, Jane Beckwith, who is very active in the Historical Society, approached me after church one day and said, I have a question, a proposal for you. Would you like to do a presentation for the Historical Society on the history of sports in Cape Elizabeth? It didn't take me a second to say no. And, she looked kind of hurt. And I said, Jane, that's too much. It's too big. Somebody could write a book about it, and I'm not going to do that. But the more I thought about it, she had a point. And so talking to some friends, talking to Jim Rowe and Jack Boyce and Steve Bates and Bob, we decided it had merit if we could narrow it down a little bit. So in further conversation, we narrowed it down to the program that you showed up for tonight. Generally, some history of Cape sports in the 1950s and 60s. If it bleeds a little earlier than that, that's great. If it goes a little beyond the 60s, that's fine. But that's what we're centering on tonight. And what we further brainstormed was we would try to find a distinguished panel. People that had been there, people that knew some of the experiences. And we have them here tonight. We have Harold Pachos, Carol Barber, Sue LaRose for part of the program, and Sue Weatherby for another part of the program. And who's supposed to be in one of these chairs is Keith Weatherby, who probably more than any one person sees the whole long picture, but he's missing in action. So hopefully he's okay, and hopefully he finds his way here. We thought he was going to be here, so I hope he's okay. So what we're going to do is ask each of the panelists to share pretty much whatever they would like to. Memories from those periods, short, long, whatever you're up for. Once that's done, they may have other memories, but we hope, and this is where it's kind of an experiment, we hope we get a lot of audience comments, participations, just like you were on the panel. And I see some people that I watched play when I was a kid. I see people I've read about in scrapbooks and news accounts of Cape Elizabeth High School's highs and lows. So hopefully we get a lot of participation from the audience. Otherwise, it might be a short night. More later, Harold. You've got more stories, I know. Funny how things come full circle, because I've heard all kinds of Bill Hoadley stories in my life, and I hadn't heard the one about the dropping the trophy, I don't think. When I was in junior high, I spent a lot of time at Mill Creek Bowlerama. And who is the man giving you the shoes and giving you the sheet to go bowl? Bill Hoadley. And he knew most of our parents, which was the fun thing. And he'd tell stories about our parents, the kids that are bowling, just like some that Harold has told. Okay.
Steve,
yes.
Bill Hoadley could sit down in the bleachers, in the stands, at half court, and just snap that ball up, swish. Amazing wrists.
I was at an alumni game, maybe the 60s, no, 70s must have been. Bill Hoadley sat on the bench of the alumni most of the game. At some point in the second half, he walked out on the floor, didn't substitute or anything. He walked out on the floor at half court, called for the ball, shot a two-hand set shot, swish, and went and sat down.
Bill's right, and it was a flick of the wrist.
That's Bill Hoadley.
Flick of the wrist. Steve, I just want to add.
Through some of that,
I did.
what can you tell us
You
about?
want me to? I don't know how to do this.
Just turn this thing.
Who will help?
I don't know how to do it
There you
either.
go. I think that's
So, I'm 10 years younger than Harold.
My neighbor.
We lived 2 houses apart on Oakhurst Road when we were growing up. Steve lived up the hill. and I noticed there's a bunch of references on this in 1959 and some other years to Larry Noyes. Larry Noyes lived between our 2 houses. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about, I went to Cottage Farms in grammar school and then to Town Hall for the 6th grade. And at that time, there was absolutely no organized sports for girls in Cape Elizabeth. Nothing. We played hopscotch and jump rope and dodgeball, duck, duck, goose. And we did some skating at the duck pond up at the end of Oakhurst Road, which was the end of Oakhurst Road, which is not the end anymore. Didn't used to go through to Mitchell Road. The boys had Little League. I wanted so badly to play Little League, I can tell you. No, girls did not play Little League. So I got to junior high, 7th and 8th grade, and still no organized sports for girls. The boys had basketball. There's a picture over there of the basketball team when I was in the 8th grade. And there's a picture of me. What did I do in the 8th grade? The only thing available for girls, cheerleading. I didn't want to be a cheerleader, but I wanted to do something, so I was a cheerleader. Got to Cape High School in 1960, and hallelujah, girls' sports. There was a swimming team. I joined the swimming team in the fall, joined the field hockey team in the fall, joined the basketball team, joined softball team, and a little track in the spring. And I was having a blast. I didn't have to be a cheerleader anymore. And I have to say that Paula Drake Hodgson was instrumental in Cape Elizabeth women's sports, girls' sports. She was the gym teacher. She taught every gym class for girls. She was the coach, as Steve said, of every girls' sport except swimming. And swimming was coached my first 2 years by Ray Bicknell. And then guess who came along?
Dawn.
Dawn Richards. And after that, Dawn was the coach. So Paula is 97 years old. Sue and I went to visit her last week. She lives at Scarborough Terrace. We went down to visit her, and I have to say, she didn't know who we were, and she has some dementia, but she looks exactly the same. She's in fabulous shape, wouldn't you say? For a 97-year-old, she looks the same. And
I can tell you her bones and ligaments are way better than mine.
yeah. So she, as I said, she coached all the sports, and as Steve said, the boys had different coaches for different sports. You know, Leroy Rand was the coach, and Ray Bicknell, and Durwood Holman, and so they had, and Guy Rowe, I noticed, was up there a little bit too. And the boys also had a varsity club, and the boys were awarded letter sweaters with CEs on them. There's probably some pictures up here somewhere. What did the girls get? Well, you can see I have letters over there, but I got letters, but I didn't get a sweater. I think they thought we were delicate flowers. When we started playing basketball, Sue didn't come till sophomore year, but when we played basketball, we were only allowed to dribble 2 steps, and then we had to pass the ball. We couldn't run across the court. The court stopped in the middle. The guard stayed on one side, and the forward stayed on the other side, and you didn't cross that line because, God forbid, girls should run more than 2 steps. So we've come a long way, and I think Sue's going to talk to some of that.
Okay. So what Carol didn't say, and just to continue on that same train of thought, when we did play basketball, I don't know what year it was, but they decided to award 2 players.
Senior year.
Oh, our senior year, she said, could go the full length, and they were called the Rovers. And of course, Carol and I were both rovers because we were going to play the entire court. So that's the way it was back then. Again, I did not move to Cape Elizabeth until the end of my sophomore year. And Carol, I think, took me on my first tour as a student. And she said, did you play sports? And I said, well, I was a cheerleader in Massachusetts. And she goes, you don't want to be a cheerleader here. She says, you need to play sports. So I played softball that first season that we were here. And of course, we played at Lions, Family Field.
Family Field.
And believe it or not, back then, Carol and I could hit home runs over the left field wall. I don't know how I did it back then because I couldn't get near it these days in my swing. So that was my first sport. And then in the fall, I had never played field hockey. And Carol goes, you need to play field hockey. And I said, I don't know the rules. I've never played it before, but I was known to be a bit of a pistol. So they put me at center forward. And there was this rule in field hockey called obstruction. And I think I obstructed 17 times in the first game. And that was back when field hockey was nothing but whistles. You as spectators will say, oh, that game, the whistle just blows all the time. Well, field hockey's come a long way since then. But back in that day, you could not put your shoulder or turn so that you were guarding the ball if an opponent was playing you. And it was called obstruction. You can put your shoulder in and guard the ball. You couldn't turn your body. And obstruction was called, every time someone moved, they called obstruction. Well, I'm really happy to say, having been involved with field hockey now for over 55 years as an official, the game has changed. There aren't that many whistles. And you can pirouette around the ball now, so long as you move the ball before your body. So that's how field hockey has progressed over the years. But most of my contributions in athletics were as a recreator. And as probably a lot of you know, I was the director of community services for over 30 years. And my one goal in life was every time we add a sport for boys, we are adding it for girls. And I can honestly tell you there weren't many people or women coming in my office saying, I think we should have this for girls, and I think we should have this for girls. But the dads came in and said, we need to start soccer. We need to start lacrosse. And I said, okay, if we do those things, we're starting them for girls. And we did. And that was sort of my goal in life. Whatever we do for the boys, we're going to do for the girls. Even flag football, it will be co-ed. Of course, as we know now, sports have come a long way. I definitely lived in the wrong time. So I never quite grew up, and I have continued in my adulthood to compete in athletics. And it was because I was angry. Title IX didn't come in until 1972. There was very, very little for girls. And so when I turned 60, actually, when I was 32, I joined a women's softball league here in South Portland. Carol played on it as well. And we played about...
I recruited her.
We played about 45 games. It was very competitive. And I have to say the average age on the team was 21, 22. Carol and I were like 35. And I played until I was in my mid-40s. And at that time, I got very involved with field hockey as an official and have continued to do that. And then I became a lacrosse official and did that for 15 years. And then when I retired in 1962, I joined Maine Senior Games. And I was on a basketball team that went to the nationals. I think I went 8 times to the national championships. And, we even got medals, and the recognition for women was every bit as glamorous as it was for males. So we come a long way, and I just can't say enough about the opportunities that these kids have today. It's just incredible. And a couple of things have happened. Even now, older athletes are being recognized. In Title IX came in 1972. 2022 was the 50-year anniversary of it, and the Athletic Directors Association of Maine honored athletes and women who had given so much to the sport, and they called us the Title IX Legends. And they had a big banquet for us. They recognized 30 of us, people like Paula Hodgson, people like Rita Brown, who is a renowned official and even does boys' games now, myself, a couple of, just 30 of us were recognized by the Athletic Association in Maine. So that was big. And then also last year in this year, in 2025, the state championships recognized the first girls teams that played in the state championships. And those people in their class, they were in the class of 1975, and so they were recognized at the state games in class A, B, C, and D. And I have a couple of friends that played for Halldale High School, and I said, I hope you're going to go and walk out on that gym floor. And they did, and they said it was fantastic. So women are getting their due. They're getting their opportunities to, have athletic scholarships to play at the Division I level. I had the great honor in 1984 to officiate the National Field Hockey Championships at the college level. And, so my whole life, especially when I started as a director of recreation, was we are going to make sure girls have their due. And I have said it to this day. And it's just another world out there. Just another world.
In the early 60s, did you have a sense you were getting cheated with opportunities?
I had a sense when I was 10 years old and I put my hair under my cap in Wellesley, Massachusetts, and went to try out for Little League. And I was in the running to make it until they recognized I was a girl. And then, of course, I couldn't play, just like you couldn't when you wanted to play.
You tried to play Cape Little League, Carol?
They wouldn't know. They knew I was a girl. And but as Sue said, I never, until freshman year in 1960, I'd never seen a hockey stick before. I'd never played field hockey. Sue said the same thing. We'd never seen a field hockey stick, and Paula brought us out and brought our field hockey sticks, and we learned. The boys were kind of the same. Steve, you didn't play soccer before you got to high school, did you, or did you? No. And in fact, when I was a sophomore, we had an exchange student named Evangelos Pavlidis. He was from Rhodes, Greece, and he had grown up playing soccer in Rhodes. And when he came on the Cape team, he was a senior that year in '62, and the Triple C tried their darndest get him kicked off the Cape team because he was so much better than all the other boys. And he'd played since he was a kid, and our boys only started in high school. So that shows how far even the boys have come.
The empty chair is for Keith Weatherby. Something came up tonight and Keith couldn't be here. It's certainly our loss. I've known Keith since I was a little kid, and over the years we've become fast friends and a number of different venues. But if there was anybody I wanted on the panel, it was Keith. Simply because of the breadth of his experience, from playing Cape sports from a young age, going through Cape High School, USM, and then being a teacher, coach, athletic director at Cape. So just a shout out to my good friend Keith, and sorry he couldn't be here tonight. We're going to vault up to 1968, and then maybe we can open it up a little bit, because I know there are people out there with some stories. I mostly played at Cape, mostly soccer and baseball, which gave me a chance to play for two very influential men in my life, and that was, of course, Leroy Rand and Vic Woodbury. Maybe I'll get a chance to say more about them later. But what I want to talk about briefly is a couple pieces of memorabilia here. Once the article went out in the Cape Courier, I got an email from a man that had this scrapbook named Lloyd Bankson, and we talked for over an hour on the phone from Washington State one night, and his memories of these years of the 50s in Cape Elizabeth are still very vivid. And he said, well, you want to talk to Pete Scott? Well, that was another name I'd heard stories about, and both of them were on the 1956 state championship basketball team. An argument could be made that this might have been the greatest basketball player ever at Cape Elizabeth High School. I know that we got some basketball players here that might agree or disagree. And the 1956 team, you can make a very good argument it might have been the greatest basketball team in the history of Cape Elizabeth High School. But that's the stuff that makes nights like this interesting. But back to 1968 briefly. When I talked to these two guys, they both referenced that great rivalry with Scarborough. And it was still very alive in their minds. And I had to break it to them. I said, well, not only isn't the rivalry there, they don't play each other. And they found that hard to believe. How can you not play Scarborough? And the more they talked about that rivalry, the more a memory came back into my mind. And this starts out with a junior high mind, okay? So this is my junior high mind. Sitting over at the gym at Scarborough High School, watching a basketball game. And those were rivals. And I know some of you, Randy Blake was in a key game with Scarborough a few years later that maybe he'll tell us about in a minute. But you would go over to Scarborough, and the gym would be packed. It would be hot. And the Scarborough, they had this cheer. And, you know, you'd start out, you know, the Scarboro. And then the whole gym would thunder, UGH. And the place would shake, and you'd look over at those evil Scarborough Redskins, and you'd hate every one of them. And especially you'd hate the coach, who is named Packy. Packy McFarland. And you'd watch him over there go back and forth and pull the strings and try to beat Cape. And who would he call on but one of the best basketball players in Maine, his son, Bobo? Well, who would call somebody Bobo? So you've got Packy and Bobo and UGH. And these guys just couldn't imagine that had gone away. But the more they talked about it, the more I could still feel that gym shake. And that continued, you know, right through high school. I went off to college, mostly at USM, UMP, or whatever they called it at the time, UMPG. Kept in touch with basketball a little bit. Went to college and studied to be a teacher. Well, when you get to end of your senior year, you're going to do some student teaching. So you look forward, that were 2 sessions, I guess probably 9 weeks each or so. And you wait for a letter, you know, real honest to goodness letter. Came in the mail, and this must be my student teaching assignments. Let's see. Oh yeah. Well, first one is right across the street. That's incredible. Cape Middle School. A guy named Bruce Lind. I had never heard of him, but to this day he's my best friend. What's the other one? No. Scarborough High School, Edward McFarlane. That's Packy. No. Yeah. How could I do that? Well, one of the great things about sports, right? I think everybody in this room probably knows that is, you know, there is fellowship mixed in with the competition. And I showed up to Scarborough High School the first time, and you know, I shook hands with Edward McFarlane, and the first thing he said, "Well, Leroy speaks awfully well of you." We became fastest of friends over the years. My wife and Packy's wife Alice became good friends. We were over to dinner one night with Packy and Alice and their daughter Martha, and the door opened from the outside, and Alice said, "Oh, I think this is Bobo." Yeah. So I got a chance to get to know Bobo and become good friends with him. So even though Lloyd and Peter can't imagine there's no rivalry with Scarborough, it certainly made things go for the Capers for quite a few years. So this is the part with 35 minutes left that we hoped some of you who came here tonight would have some stories to share also. The panel is welcome to chime in at any time. I see Randy, I see Phil. The 50s, we're still going back to the, you don't want the mic, you want to come up here?
I don't think so, I think I can talk.
Well, we're being recorded, Phil, even though an old teacher
Okay.
still needs a mic occasionally.
Okay, thank you. Bankson, he lived on the corner of Fowler Road, and he had a barn. And we played basketball in that barn year-round. And Lester Jordan came up. Lester used to coach the kids all the time. And all of a sudden, a kid named Farnsworth, who was just an average player, all of a sudden was a world beater. And Dale Farnsworth was on the that 56 team, along with my brother. Don, my brother. We were competitive. I tried to play basketball. I really liked basketball. I graduated in 1955, having not played a varsity starting role at all. He starts as a sophomore, and they win the state championship. I don't like that at all. But you mentioned playing in Scarborough and Falmouth. I remember playing in those gyms. There were cement walls around the edges that if you ran off the court, you ran into a wall. Or you could play out at Gorham, and if you went in for a layup and the people had just been walking in, you might go right out the door because it was always slippery there. Okay, that's it for me. Oh yeah, wait a minute. I got one more. Yeah, you lived on my street, didn't Randy? Longfellow Drive? Yes. Yeah. Playing in Elizabeth Park, it was amazing. The Weatherby boys, the Ted Ray, Randy Ray, the Newman kids, and Sullivans and Blakes. There were all kinds. We had games all over the place. Joey Russ, huge amounts of. So we learned how to play. Okay, I got one more thing too.
the teachers and coaches that we had at Cape Elizabeth were phenomenal, and they made huge differences in a lot of people's lives. In that '56, John Whitcomb was the JV coach. Bill Madden was the coach in 1953, but Durwood Holman certainly was a role model for me. I ended up coaching baseball 15 years and teaching mathematics at the Thornton Academy. Okay, I got one more, and then I promise that's it. I didn't mean to do this, but you keep triggering things. You talked about the girls' basketball, and I ended up, I was coaching baseball, but the day before that girls' basketball season started in 1973, they had changed the rules just previously, and the girls' coach quit the day before the season, and the athletic director, Brad Leach, came up to me and said, "Help, Phil, 1 year. Please give me 1 year." He knew I knew something about basketball, so I ended up coaching girls' basketball 8 years. I coached baseball 2 more years, but running summer basketball, summer baseball was too much, and I had daughters who played basketball, so I ended up dropping baseball and coaching girls basketball for 8 years. Okay, that's it. There's your mic.
Eloquent, Phil, eloquent. Who wants to add to that? Steve Bates has great stories.
I can tell
Yeah, we'll be-
Durwood Holman story. I was very fortunate to play for him and mentor all the way in all avenues of life. I had occasion to visit him in his assisted living place at age 99. I said, "Coach, can you name 1 or 2 events over your extensive career that stand out?" Without a flash, he just said 1957, Terry Burke's back-to-back no-hitters. And then, of course, he fast-forwarded 20 years to the late 70s when Bob Raftis struck out 19 out of 21 batters in a 7-inning game. I also asked Durwood, I said, in all your years, what's the longest hit you saw on the current middle school field, which was the high school field? And for those who remember the old oak tree that stood at the Scott Dyer, Durwood said it was a summer American Legion game when a guy from, I believe it was Smith-Toby Post in Bath, hit one in the air into that tree. And I said, "Okay, how long was it?" And he said, "Ask Leroy and Steve Hill." And I believe you guys went out and measured, and it was, which my wife and I went out and measured this later just as a check, and I can't remember whether it was 418 or 480. What did you come up with?
450.
450, okay. Longest hit ever hit on that field, I think. So.
I'd like to talk a little bit about my brother, Ray Moulton. So Ray was an amazing baseball and basketball player. One arm, he lost his arm when he was 5 or 6. Never used anything, never used an artificial arm. But he was kind of known in town as this incredible athlete, and people would come just to see him play baseball. And now the field is named for him, the Ray Moulton Field. And I don't know, he was just amazing to watch, and he was an amazing guy. And one other thing, this is not about my brother Ray, but Carol, I think you lived in the house that I'm living in now. Right. So everything goes around. So when I was living in Cape Elizabeth, one of my best friends was Larry Noyes, and that whole neighborhood. But I moved, I don't know how many years ago, but I moved to this house, and then we found out through a friend of Carol's that I was living in Carol's house. So, yeah, it just kind of go around. Anyway. Yes. 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 And my friend Judy, who's here, she lives in Larry's house, and she's lived there a long time, right, Judy? I don't know how long, but anyway. Yeah, my brother was phenomenal, and yeah, okay. Thank you.
Now, let me use that comment as a little segue, because in that timeline you have, and if everybody didn't get one, we've got a few extras here. But there is a line at some point in there that bowling was a pretty active undertaking at Cape different years. And in this timeline, it says 1 year, the high single for bowling for Cape Elizabeth was Ray Moulton. If you didn't get one of these, you're welcome to it. I kind of got carried away. This was going to be a couple of pages. And I think it's 16 now. My email is on here, and I hope I will kind of keep adding to this as I, hear stories and get new information. Corrections and additions are more than welcome. Just shoot me an email. There's some significant events. It's not intended to be inclusive of every major event in the 50s and 60s. There's some little tidbits here, as well as, mention of the 56 state championship. I found out after I printed it, somehow I left out the 53 championship, so I had to go back and print a new page and take all the staples out, Bob, and restaple it. And somehow I left out one of Cape's greatest basketball outputs was the day Mel Searles scored 47 points at Freeport. Steve Bates reminded me I should have that there. Were you there at that game, Randy? I'm going to hand the mic to you in a second. Yes. But I think the copy on my computer now, I added that in. Would you like to say a few words, sir?
Sure.
Sure. I'll twist your arm.
So the rivalry with Scarborough was probably the biggest rivalry that we had in high school, both in basketball and soccer. We had Evangelos Pavlidis one year. Scarborough had this young man from Mexico or someplace. And he was their star that year, but we still beat them. Going back to the progress with girls in sports, I have a granddaughter. She was in the softball picture there, the undefeated team. And when she played hockey in high school, and she was the only girl on the male hockey team. So it's come a long way, and she still plays on. She pulled a bureau out of our basement the other day, single-handedly up the stairs. So she's still a tough hockey player. And so we have a chance of maybe moving to Scarborough in the near future. To Piper Shores. And that really grates on me. What's that?
I didn't mention where I live now.
And the other thing, in the front of the gym, that old gym, there was this saying about, when the one good sportsman comes to play against you and all of this, and be a good sportsman. And I always turned it around. You show me a loser, and you show me a good loser, I'll show you. You show me a loser.
Just one more plug. One more plug on Mel Searles. Randy and Keith and I were very fortunate to play with this guy who I think New Jersey was in his background, but immediately before, I think he'd come down from Lubec, Maine. Searles, for the 2 years, I believe, he played in Cape. He, by far and away, was the best player. You know, they didn't rate him for state players at the time, but his 47-point performance at Freeport, where Randy was there, Keith was there, I was there. We were all participating with Mel, but most of it was just as observers. Out of 47 points, he had 25 points in the last quarter. And I hate to say we did not win that game.
There's a sports lesson in that story someplace. Who else? We'll go with Jim and then back here.
Yeah, I just had a couple quick ones. One of them was related to Mel Searles. I was in junior high school at the time when he was playing for the high school varsity. And I spent a lot of time in my driveway shooting baskets, a lot of time. Broke a few garage windows, but my father was very understanding. Anyway, one day I was out in the garage shooting, and this car pulled up, and it was a carload of high school varsity basketball players, and one of them was Mel Searles. And I can tell you that I could not have been more excited if it had been Bob Cousy and Bill Russell pulling up in that car. It was just, you know, a junior high school kid's dream. Another one is a Bill Hoadley story. Bill was noted for not only for his athletic prowess, but also for his sense of humor. I knew Bill since I was probably 3 or 4 years old. Bill lived with his mother, as Harold said, on Shore Road. I lived diagonally across backyards from Bill and his mother and their family. And his nephew was John St. Laurent, who was he was my earliest best friend. And we got to know each other very well. So we spent a lot of time at each other's houses. And Billy taught us how to throw a baseball, and among other things. And he also would entertain his softball team at his house, where a lot of beers were consumed. And for two little wide-eyed boys, watching these guys have all kinds of fun, that made an impression. But fast forward for a few years, and I was at the University of Maine, and it was a semester break, and I came down, and Billy at that time was holding court at the Griffin Club bar down in Knightville, as he did most nights. But I walked in the door, it was the semester break, with a couple of my fraternity brothers, and Billy was sitting at the end of the bar, and he turns around and looks at me, and he says, in his loud tenor voice, "Jimmy Rowe," he said, "you go to the University of Maine, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And he said, "You want to know how I learned the words to the Maine Stein song?" I said, "Sure." And he said, "Well, I went to Bates College, and I played football there. And we had a game at Orono one day, and we lost 56-0. And that's how I learned the words to the Maine Stein song."
You know, Jim Rowe mentions John St. Laurent, who was class of 1968 at Cape Elizabeth High School. And food aficionados, John was quite a chef, and he turned to barbecue for quite a few years. And remember the name of his barbecue joint? Uncle Billy's, Bill Hoadley. Who else was next?
Thank you, Steve. I'm not a Cape Elizabeth native. I'm from Westbrook. My name's Don Douglas, class of 1969. But I thought if I said I was here with Phil that you guys wouldn't question my credentials. I've got a couple of Cape Elizabeth names I can drop to endear me to you. One is Lester Jordan, who not only had a terrific career, as you've heard tonight, for Cape Elizabeth, but has a venerated place in Westbrook baseball history. He was the coach of the 1951 Suburban Little League team, which went to Williamsport. And that team was made up of players from Cape Elizabeth and Portland, I believe, and a core group of 4 or 5 from Westbrook. So one of those players was Jimmy Burrell, whom you may remember as the longtime coach of the Manchester Post Legion team. And Jimmy would always talk about that experience of the Suburban Little League team coached by Lester Jordan as one of the most memorable moments and experiences of his life. So Lester Jordan has a very fond and revered place among Westbrook baseball history. Second name I want to drop is Pete Dresser. 1968. I played baseball at Westbrook as well. Played against Peter in the Legion because we didn't play in high school, but played each other, Morrow Post versus Manchester Post. Peter was drafted by the Chicago Cubs and was playing in the Cubs organization in 1973 when I was drafted and joined the Quincy, Illinois Single A Midwest League minor league team that summer. So I arrived in Quincy, Illinois. Pete Dresser knew I was coming and very graciously said, "Do you want to share my apartment until you can find a place to stay?" And I said, "Sure, I'd be happy to, Peter." He was being very, very hospitable. The only problem is I've got a roommate, that will be in the room as well, in the apartment as well. And I said, "Well, who is it?" And he said, "Well, he's another pitcher. His name is Bruce Suter." You may recognize that name as a pitcher who went on to have a Hall of Fame career with the Chicago Cubs and St. Louis Cardinals. So Pete Dresser and Bruce Suter were very, very close friends playing minor league baseball.
Would a member of the class of '69 like to say anything? Sure.
It's me again. This man sitting next to me was a pitcher for Westbrook High School when I was coaching. He was one hell of a pitcher, too. The other thing is, we talk about Reynolds Moulton was a classmate of mine, and he was just an absolutely amazing athlete. His he had a right hand, and he would play center field. He'd grab that ball, flip the glove, grab the ball, and throw it in. It was amazing. He also showed us how to jump off Fry's Leap out there in Sevago Lake.
Every year it was like he had to jump off Fry's Leap.
Yeah.
Even after he had a heart surgery or something, and I thought that he was recovering somewhere.
Yeah.
And I was up at the lake, and I was on the dock, and this boat comes by fast, and it was Ray and some girl, and he said, "Get in, we're going to Fry's Leap." I said, "You just had heart surgery." "Oh, we're still going to Fry's Leap," and that's what he did.
Yeah, and you did mention that he didn't have a.
No, he never had.
But
his father kept trying to get him an artificial arm, and in those days they were very heavy and clunky, and he just refused. He just refused it.
I think he did have it for. I was.
A week or two.
Yeah, in about the 6th grade or 7th grade over at Town Hall School, and he, I remember that. Yeah.
And back to you, Phil.
I represent the class of 1969, and my name is David Averill. And how are you? I competed against Don for 3 years in high school. He was an amazing pitcher and a pretty good basketball player too. But we had some very distinct struggles during our competition. He was able to play with one of the best basketball players I've played against, and Matt Donahue from Westbrook, who was sensational, actually. But going back, I played in Cape. I got to Cape Elizabeth in about 1961. My father retired from the Army, and we moved from Okinawa to Cape Elizabeth. And from that point on, probably I spent more time with Leroy Rand than I did with my parents. But we all did. Leroy was a fixture, and he was an incredible coach and leader. And we were so lucky in Cape Elizabeth because not only did we have Leroy, and then we got Vic Woodbury. So we had two incredible baseball coaches, both in the Maine Hall of Fame. And I was lucky enough to go on and play for 7 different coaches that are in the Maine Hall of Fame in my career through college. And so Cape Elizabeth was an open door to go forward.
And Dave Ravel has been one of my lifelong friends and came all the way down from Casco tonight. Harold wants to say a little something, but while I'm going that way, I would tell you mentioned Pete Dresser, Don. Pete was my friend, my teammate, kept in touch over the years. Sadly, we lost Pete 2 or 3 years ago. Pete called me one day, which was very rare. Pete was down in Florida, but he told me that he'd been diagnosed with a brain tumor. And he was optimistic, just like Pete would be, he was going to fight it. Didn't win that game. 2 days ago, I got an email. I've got a lot of emails from this event. This person reflected on 8, 9, 10 years old with Leroy Rand when Leroy ran the summer program. And what this person was reflecting on was the picture. There was a team picture in the Courier, the 1967 Triple C Championships. I was on that team. David was on that team. Jim was on that team. Scored every run, right? Scored every single run we ever had on that team. And this person had a steel trap memory for these events when he was 8 or 9 years old. Only my friend Bob Penny had a better memory, and Bob would be at a night, but we lost Bob a year or 2 ago. But when I looked to see who had sent me this email, it said Peter Dresser. I said, wait a minute. Is this some cruel trick somebody's playing here somehow? No. Dave didn't remember this. I didn't remember this. But for a couple of years in Cape Elizabeth, there were 2. Peter, do you know this guy?
The other one was on my Little League team.
Yes, Fox and Ginn.
Yeah.
He remembered that, right? That was the team? Well,
We were an expansion team.
well, maybe he was on both. But no, seriously, in a couple of exchange of emails, I found out he was legit. He was 2 years younger and came to Cape for just a couple of years, and then as he said in an email, his dad got transferred to Boston. But he seemed to like he was a pretty good baseball player too. But none of us growing up, Cape was a small town, but if you lived on one side of the town, you didn't always get to the other, apparently. So 2 Pete Dressers. Harold.
I just wanted to hit 3 or 4 historical items, but first Don reminded me of Jimmy Burrell and the kids that went to Williamsport. There were 4 from Cape Elizabeth. There were 3 or so from Scarborough, about 3 from Westbrook, and 3 from Falmouth, and that was the team. I had some experience with it because I went to the game in Schenectady, New York, where they won the Eastern Regional Championship. Lester Jordan was the coach, and then I went to Williamsport with Billy Hoadley and Al DeSantis, his mother driving, and she drove us to Williamsport, where we saw Texas beat Maine 3-1, but somebody mentioned about coming in the military, Dave, I think. There was a kid at Cape Elizabeth, lived on Wood Road. His father was an officer at Fort Williams, because in those days we had kids in our school whose parents were at Fort Williams. And so this guy's name was Dickie Williams. He came from California. He was in town 3 years as a elementary school kid, took the team, the Maine team, to the Little League World Series. I think it's only been done 2 or 3 times ever, and then went back to California. So, but I just wanted to, Cape Elizabeth State Championship, first one in basketball, 1953, against Southwest Harbor, Pemmican High School. At Waterville, overtime.
It's all on the timeline.
It's in the timeline, overtime, but what you don't have in the timeline is the best. There were twin, big, strong kids from Pemmican, two of them, brothers, twins, and they were dominant. The game's tied with about 2 seconds to go, and one of the brothers, Johnny Carroll, missed both his foul shots. And that took it to overtime, and we won it in overtime. Fast forward. Our big man was Ed Mandel. Ed Mandel played with Phil. You know, you remember him very well. And Eddie Mandel, after he graduated from Cape High School, became a state policeman. He retired from the state police, and he became the police chief in Northeast Harbor, Maine, on Mount Desert Island. At the same time, the guy that missed the foul shots, Johnny Carroll, was the police chief in Southwest Harbor, the next town. And really an amazing coincidence. Two quick things. Ray, I was going to speak about Ray because he was amazing, and Phil described how he did it. He played in the outfield, catch the fly ball, throw the ball up in the air, throw his glove up in the air to get rid of it, catch the ball coming down, and throw into second. Absolutely amazing. Bill Madden was the coach of the 1953 team. He came from Attleboro, Massachusetts, was a graduate of Attleboro High School. After World War II and a GI Bill, went to Boston University, where he was a big star, big basketball star. His first job after getting out of college, he found in Maine. He wasn't intending to come to Maine. Anyway, he was our coach, a great guy. He left. We won the state championship, back to Attleboro, became the longtime basketball coach at Attleboro High School, and then the athletic director. And finally, Durwood Holman. Durwood Holman, it was said of Durwood Holman something that every teacher, coach would want to be known as. He was a teacher, and he taught chemistry and baseball.
And he was a real gentleman. I'm told the library appreciates it if we wrap up by 8 o'clock, but I have to come back over here just for a second because I told 3 people I would. And that is Lloyd Bankson, member of the 56 state championship team, Pete Scott, and their friend Joyce McKean, who was in your vein, Carol and Sue, and I'll tell you in a second. But they all would have liked to be here tonight. They're all doing well, Washington State, Florida, and Connecticut. But Lloyd Bankson was trying to copy some pictures from a scrapbook, so he just decided to send the whole scrapbook. And that's gonna become part of the Historical Society. He says, 1956 was the opening of the new gym. However, it was after the season was over. Harold probably has stories about that. We were the last team to play on the top floor of the high school. Imagine, I mean, if you've ever been up in that area. The most important thing to happen was having Coach Bill Bonneville. I thought of him often during my career and blame him for a lot of my success. The good lessons in life came from Bill. I'm 87 and soon to be 88. It's sad to see so many of my CEHS pals that have passed. I'm one of 4 boys in my senior class that's still alive. It will be great to attend on January 6th, but travel over 6,000 miles is not in the cards. Pete Scott, this gentleman here, he was so moved by this that he sent this framed, and if you haven't seen this, this is a 1956 state championship jacket. Pete had this all packaged up, insured, and shipped 2 weeks from Florida to my house, arrived about 24 hours ago. I was unwrapping them this morning in my kitchen. But he donates these to the Historical Society. And he says, I wish I could be with you tonight. People don't realize the effects of a good sports program until some years have passed. And I think in that one sentence, maybe he summed up tonight. Coach Bill Bonville ran a great program, helped me raise my 4 children and one 14-year-old who came to us later. To us, Coach Bill Bonville disciplined us, and that carried over into raising our family and being in business. The results, all 5 kids turned out just fine, and from a business standpoint, when things were tough, I would think back to Coach Bill, and that would get me going again. Being a member of the $1 Million Roundtable in insurance sales must have been partly due to Bill. I feel very lucky. I'm one of 4 boys in the class of '56 still alive, and say hello to Harold. I got a phone call from a lady that has kept in touch with her classmates, Pete and Lloyd. Her name was Joyce McKean, now Joyce McKean Rivers. She was the class of '57. Even a few years ago, she had donated a bunch of scrapbooks to the Historical Society. I had a great talk with her from her home in Connecticut. She was one of the early young female athletes of the '50s, playing 4 years of basketball, or what passed for basketball then, 4 years of volleyball, and she was also, I think, most outstanding as a swimmer. But she decided at the beginning of her senior year she had just devoted too much in the pool, so she kind of ended her swimming career. I guess what we would call now burnout, perhaps. So it's 3 minutes of 8, Jackie.
Can I have just 1 second?
Cape Grad should be able to wrap things up.
I want to tell a story about your father. I'm Jack Boyce, class of '62. I played a little ball, and Steve's father was one of the best umpires, Doc Hill. And I happened to get on second base one day, and something happened, whether it was a fly ball far enough out so that I took off for third, slid in a cloud of dust. And his father, Doc Hill, was umpiring third. And he looks at me, he says, "Out! Safe! Out!" I jumped up in his face and I said, "Make up your mind." The problem is, he says, "I did. You're out."
Bob, do you want to have any final words of wisdom?
No, just a very big thank you. And again, those gifts will be a great addition to our collection, and thank you very much.
If anybody has any memorabilia sitting around that you wonder what's going to become of it, talk to Jack, talk to Bob. No, thanks, Rocco. This is very, very fun. And keep in touch. If you didn't get a timeline, grab one. Let me know what else belongs in it. Have a good night.